Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over our top 5 support picks for tier list 9.5. But before we jump into it, the most important thing to note really is in the patch notes, there are some nerfs to Relic, where it no longer heals you substantially when you are at high HP, and it has been changed from 2% HP missing to a flat HP, depending on how much HP you're missing from 0 to 100%. This means that topping yourself off as a support, as a tanky support, is a little bit harder. Plus, as you get into the later stages, Relic won't heal you for as much. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into our top 5. So, coming in at number 5 is going to be Galio. Now, the reason why Galio is now appeared in this tier list is that I've actually gotten substantial amounts of games under him, and it's going to be going with kind of a theme of Relic now. Since Relic doesn't heal for nearly as much, if you are playing a tanky support, you're going to want to have the ability to go in on players and force the issue, rather than defensive supports like Tahm Kench and Braum, who may not have nearly the engaging power or 2v2 power in the early stages and can no longer play nearly as defensively because they get poked out since the Relic nerfs. So, we're jumping into Galio because Galio just has an immense amount of crowd control and extreme tankiness. On top of the fact that he has Aftershock, he also has the taunt damage reduction too, which can range anywhere from 15% on physical damage to even upwards of 20 or 25%. So he's just incredibly tanky. Now this is also incredibly valuable because of the fact that he's 2 forms of crowd control. On top of having the taunt, he also has his E knockup, and a lot of his damage is just base damages from all of his spells, especially his Justice Punch, which is his powerful passive. I found this champion just being able to literally just flash, taunt, and CC lock someone from 100% 0. So because of that, the Relic nerfs aren't nearly as relevant to him, plus he's incredibly tanky and has a lot of teamfight utility in all stages of the game. So we will jump into our rune setup for right now. So without further ado, we're going to be taking Aftershock, and then after that, basically one of the things that you'll see from tanky supports for my personal bias is Demolish versus Font of Life are both actually pretty strong right now, and it's dependent on your lane matchup. If you feel like you can actually walk up and get Demolish procs off, maybe you have like a Caitlyn or an Ashe, something that pushes really, really hard, then I recommend taking the Demolish proc on tanky supports. But if in the case that you're not, maybe you need to all in a lot more, you're not going to get as much sieging power, or you're just a relatively defensive lane, then I've been liking Font of Life a little bit more just because as you build more health and you're taunting, you're CCing people up, knocking people up, you're just always proccing the Font of Life on people and healing your teammates. It's just a very good teamfight talent in general. And then for the second tree, I've pretty much just stopped taking bone plating. For what it's worth, I've looked at the numbers. Since its duration is only 1.5, you usually never get 3 stacks of it, so I've just not been a big fan. So if I'm against other melee champions that I don't feel like are going to harass me, I've just been opting into conditioning since 10 minutes comes on pretty easily, and games are going longer, so you get a lot of value out of conditioning in this case. And then if I'm against maybe a poke lane where I'm not completely convinced that I'm going to be able to handle getting harassed a lot, then I go for Second Wind. Then after that, in the final tree, it's mostly up to you on your build path. So if you decide that you're going to do the pro build where you go Redemption first, always recommend Revitalize because you get triple multipliers on all these stats. So the first 5% is actually 15% on Redemption, plus the extra 10% when people are under 40% is actually 30% instead, for a grand total of 45% bonus healing and shielding on Redemption just with this talent alone. If you decide that you're going to go something maybe more like Zeke's or Knight's Vow, and you're not going to build a Redemption, I personally recommend going just Overgrowth for just overall tankiness. After that, we're going to be going into the Inspiration tree, and since you are running Relic, always running Minion Dematerializer is going to be a must. And since there's not any Hextech Flash cool things, I've just been opting into getting Boots as the secondary afterwards. So after that, we're going to be looking at the stats. So definitely want the 9 Adaptive Force, since AP damage in the early stages just goes really good across the board for Galio and goes with the theme of him one-shotting. After that, it's mostly personal preference. If you feel like you can kill the lane opponent, or maybe you're against a poke champion and you want to just be able to all in, then a second Adaptive Force is completely reasonable. If you're not quite comfortable with the champion yet, though, then it's completely fine if you go Armor or MR based on your lane matchup. After that, it's just kind of depending on what support I'm playing against and what AD carry. In cases where actually I've been playing against Kai'Sa, I've been preferring the magic resist and feel incredibly tanky when I go this. Otherwise, if you're maybe against like a traditional support, like a Braum or an Alistar or something like that, then you're just going to want to take armor. But in cases where they are poking you a lot with magic damage, so Zyra or Brand, etc., then magic resist is going to do you better. This is mostly up to your personal preference and kind of your intuitive sense. So, jumping into itemization. So for the most part, you are not going to be buying Moby Boots on this champion. And the reason for that is this champion needs as many tanky stats as possible, much like Braum. Plus on top of the fact that in most cases, if you're playing the champion right, you're going to be using your ultimate to get to fights and start fights. So because of that extra range, you don't really need mobility boots. So it's mostly up to you whether you go Merc Treads or Ninja Tabbies, depending on how much crowd control or physical damage dealers there are on the enemy team. And then we're going to be upgrading our Relic to the Tier 3 as fast as possible. It's just a really cost-efficient item, even after the nerfs, because it gives you health regen, CDR, and an extra Relic stack and wards, all very valuable attributes. So there's two ways you can deviate from this build. Now a lot of people have been building Redemption. I think this is completely fine and reasonable build. Just make sure you pick up Revitalize. And then after the Redemption, usually you want to build into something maybe like a Knight's Vow and a Locket. Just getting as many utility tanky items as possible. Now the option 2 is to go the Zeeks. This one isn't as popular, but I've tried it in a couple of stages just to get more tanky stats because Redemption doesn't make you nearly as tanky. And I've kind of liked it, having the hero's entrance knock up into already having like an AoE slow going on. And in that case, you're just going to be going Zeke's, Knight's Vow, and then Locket. Those are pretty much going to be your 3 core items. And then after that, your final item can be something like a Gargoyle Stoneplate, just to make sure that you're just as tanky as possible while in the middle of the team fights. So, going on to number 4 in our tier list is going to be Alistar. Kind of continuing the theme of, tanky supports that have ways to engage and team fight and also score 2v2 kills. I find that Alistar is just relatively easy to play, really reliable, has a lot of unique utility and skill sets because you can use different mix-ups, headbutt people away, flash pulverize, trample, pulverize, headbutt people into you. Just in general, you have 2v2 kill pressure, which is going with the theme of kind of Galio. But Alistar's a little bit better, in my opinion, for solo queue, just because you don't have to coordinate using your ult correctly. Plus, he's just tankier in general and can snowball a lot harder in the sense of being able to dive people quite frequently. So, jumping into runes setups is going to look exactly like Galio for the most part. We're going to be taking Aftershock. Same thing applies where if you can hit the turret, then Demolish is great, but Font of Life is actually incredibly powerful on Alistar, especially since I go Zeke's first, and usually you're just getting the Zeke's proc slow on everybody, so you just apply Font of Life across the team fight, so it feels really good. So that's just mostly personal preference on whether or not you're going to hit the turret or not, or focus on team fights. Same logic applies between conditioning and second wind. If you're against someone who pokes you a lot, then second wind's going to be good. Otherwise, if you're against other melee champions, or you're just confident that you're not going to get harassed too much, conditioning is going to be your go-to. After that, I've just been pretty much permanently going Overgrowth because I'm not a big fan of getting Redemption on things like Alistar. I just don't think it really makes sense with the champion. There are much better items, in my opinion, that make you way tankier. After that, the only real adjustable is you're going to most likely take Hextech Flash and Minion Dematerializer instead of Boots. And this is just because Alistar can get around a lot of good corners and force engages via Hextech Flash, especially when your Flash is down. And you want to be using your Flash aggressively to score kills quite frequently. I found that once you start getting the hang of using Hextech Flash, it opens up a lot of kill opportunities, being able to go over terrain or come out of brushes and just catch people off guard. Overall, big fan of it. After that, for rune stats, we're going to be going attack speed. A lot of people ask me why I don't go the CDR one. 1 to 10 is usually just really hard to get since in solo queue, usually I'm about level 11 when the game ends, so I'm only getting about 5% of it. I'd much rather have the attack speed just for the auto attacks for pushing waves, relic stacks, auto attacking when I'm all inning, and for the trample auto attack. If you prefer that you'd rather have CDR, it's completely reasonable to say it, but in most cases, if your game doesn't go exceptionally long, it's really hard to get towards the upper echelon of the 10% since it's levels 1 through 18. After that, we're just going to be doing armor or MR just based on your matchups. So if maybe you're against a champion that does a lot of physical damage, so we'll just use the example of Pyke Lucian, then you're going to take double armor in cases where maybe there's a mix of it, so there's Lucian Nami, Lucian Janna, or maybe like a Lucian Zyra, then what I've just been doing is just splitting it, taking one MR rune and taking one armor rune. This feels pretty good in most cases, and just you gotta adjust it based on your matchups and what's harassing you, what's not creating pressure in the lane. So jumping into itemization, once again, we're going to be getting Moby Boots on this champion, just moving around, repositioning, plus coming out of brushes, just giving you that extra movement speed is very important. And you don't have the Galio ult to initially jump into team fights, so you actually have to be positioned correctly. After that, we're going to be upgrading our Relic to the tier 3, and then we're looking at itemization afterwards. So I've just been a big fan still, even after the nerfs of Zeke's. It just seems really, really powerful. It gives you armor, MR, covers your CDR. Means that you don't have struggles with mana, with longer fights, because you're building a Glacial Shroud. And then it just works well with your ultimate. You combo in, you ulti, the Zeke's is going off. This is also why I like Font of Life, because the Zeke slow is then proccing Font of Life on everybody. And just overall, it just has really good efficiency in team fights. Plus, getting your AD carry online a little bit faster and giving you more damage feels pretty good. It's kind of like the poor man's version of Ardent Censor in a lot of cases. After that, it's just Knight's Vow and Locket, and the way you choose between Knight's Vow and Locket is just based on what the enemy team comp is. If there's a lot of magic damage, a lot of AoE damage, and you feel like you need Locket right there, perfect, get that. Or if you're just frontlining with multiple frontliners, let's say you have like a Sejuani and a Scion on your team, and you can give them defensive stats and shields there, then you can get value out of that. If there's maybe an assassin diving your AD carry, or there's a lot of physical damage, then Knight's Vow is usually the second item that I go. But either way, you're going to be getting both of these items, just the ordering matters pretty much in that regard. And then we're just going to get a Gargoyle Stoneplate just like Galio, just to be as tanky as possible when we combo in the middle of 4 or 5 people and soaking all of the damage. So, jumping into number 3 is going to be Soraka. And the reason why Soraka is really good is mostly nerfs to a lot of other champions and a lot of other things around it. So healing reduction is a little bit harder to get, and a lot less mid laners are going Morel and Omicron. This means that just operating under the cost requirements of people means that you're not going to run into as much healing reduction. So this champion just goes up in value in that regard. Plus, on top of that, as you've seen in the nerfs to Relic, a lot of champions can't restore as much health as much. And so champions like Soraka, who harass a lot in the early stages and mostly rely on momentum in early trading, feel a little bit better. Plus, I really like this champion just as an ability to turn around team fights. Plus, a lot more people are more willing to pick tankier champions. Maybe not full tank champions, but tankier ones. And since you have more of a front line in front of you, you can derive a lot of value from their crowd control and their ability to soak damage in front of you. So, jumping into rune setups. There are 2 rune setups that you can run separately, but I don't particularly like one of them, which is Guardian. So we'll go over the Guardian one first, which is the one I pretty much don't run at all, since I think you should be taking area and pressuring as hard as possible. But in the case that maybe you're scared of getting all in by a lane and you're not comfortable playing aggressive, you can go Guardian. And so we're going to be taking Guardian. Then Font of Life in most cases, just to apply more healing in your team fights. If you're hitting a Q or your silence root goes off, it's just really easy to proc Font of Life. And then if you're against a ranged champion, you're going to be taking second wind since you're trading a lot. If you're against a melee champion, then I'm most likely opt into conditioning, just play defensively until I get that. Then after that, we're going to be taking Revitalize just for extra healing and shielding. And then we're going to be running Sorcery secondary with Mana Flow Ban. And in most cases, Transcendence right now. The reason why is I've started to taking Transcendence more frequently just because I overcap on CDR quite easily, especially with a champion like Soraka. Pretty much every item you build is Soraka is CDR. So it just gives you standalone AP, and it's a little bit more reliable than Absolute Focus, which has been nerfed significantly. And then after that, we're just going to be taking double Adaptive for the extra AP. And then your armor or MR is just mostly based off of whoever you're trading with a lot more. If you're trading with the support more frequently, like it's a Nami, Zyra, etc., take MR. If they're more of a standard lane, like Braum, Lucian, then I'm more likely to take the armor. Now, I personally don't like this rune setup at all, because I think you should just be playing aggressively, but it's not a bad defensive option if you want to have a way to survive laning phase. You can also take one of the flexes and turn that into armor and MR. Also, if you kind of want to go with the theme of you're taking Guardian to just not die in lane, so double armor or double MR is completely fine too. But for the rune setup that I mostly take for laning phase, we're going to be running Summoning, Airy, and Mana Flow Band, and then Transcendence and Gathering Storm. Now, the reason why I don't take Scorch in most cases is I've just found that Scorch's numbers just don't support going it anymore. I'd much rather have Transcendence and Gathering Storm just have a ton of ability power in the mid game, and that allows me to heal for substantially huge numbers, since the other runes don't seem to do enough in the laning phase to warrant their existence, especially since games are actually going a little bit longer now, so it's more reasonable to opt into team fighting in mid to late game than it used to be in the game. After that, we're going to be taking Resolve Tree with either Second Wind or Conditioning, just based on my matchup. If I feel like I'm trading a lot, then I'll take Second Wind against them. If not, otherwise I'm going to opt into Conditioning and just Revitalize to get extra healing. It's just an incredibly powerful and potent way. And then once again for the stats, it's just double adaptive and then armor and MR based on your matchup and trading. So a lot of people always want to know what I end up building. In most cases, like probably 70-80% of the time, I do go Spell Thieves, but I only upgrade it to the tier 2 and I get Lucidity Boots. Pretty much never want to upgrade the Spell Thieves to tier 3. It's just not worth the gold relative to other items that you can purchase. So for me personally, I've been always going Redemption into Mikhail's build. And the reason for this is I feel like it gives you way more flexibility when it comes to playing the game. So I like to stand mid, push in waves, and then I have the Redemption and my ultimate to completely turn fights. Plus, I really like Redemption over Athene's is usually the conversation a lot of people have, because I can also Redemption myself and keep myself alive when I'm getting dove in team fights. Just because of these dynamics, I much prefer Redemption over Athene's. I don't think it's that great of a build. Plus, I feel like the only way Athene's works is if you invest 4 to 5 points in Silence, then you're using the Silence to do damage, not to actually CC and stop crowd control coming out from the enemy team. So I think it just goes against the complete design of the champion, so not a big fan. So to tie into that too, for skill build, usually I put 2 to 3 points in the Silence, E, for laning phase, depending on how the laning is going, and then I max W, and then I max the Silence second, and then I max Q last, just so that people kind of understand my skill build. So usually at level 9 or level 10, I already have max W for the extra healing. So after we get the Redemption and the Mikhails, then it's kind of just the world is your oyster. If you think the game is going to go extremely long, you can go Shurilias and then Warmogs. And the reason why is that since Warmogs has been moved to 3000 HP threshold, it's really hard to hit that number. So I like to go Shurilias, which just gives me mobility and utility to move around the team fight. And this gives me health. And that will help me bump my numbers to get to the 3000 HP for the Warmogs last. Now, if you don't care about building a Warmogs and you just want as much healing and shielding as possible and you're not interested in the like regeneration factors, you can go Ardent third. It's completely fine. And then maybe something like a Death Cap as a last item, and you'll just have a ton of ability power and your heal numbers will be really high, but you won't have the longevity of team fighting. Also, a lot of people ask me how to deal with situations where they're maybe getting dove a lot. So if you're running Barrier and Redemption, you still feel like you're dying, you can, as a second item in most cases, just opt into Azonias and then get the Mikhails third. This will solve like a lot of issues with maybe Rangars, Hekarims, Zeds, etc. Just diving you in team fights, and if you feel like you can't survive, then boom, you get the Shurilias, or you get the Zonias second, and it should be incredibly hard for you to die in those team fights. But I don't recommend rushing the Zonias, because if you build that first item and nobody goes on you, your healing's so weak that you're kind of useless in team fights. So I like doing it after I get the Redemption in any cases of this regard. So, jumping into number 2 is going to be Lux. And I know this is probably going to frustrate a lot of people, but I've been having a lot of success with Lux lately, and the reason for this is just because she seems to cover a lot of the systems that I like for support. She pokes and harasses in laning phase, she has kill pressure if she hits her snare, and she still has really good utility in her shields. I also like Lux because of the fact that I found that you can build her 2 different ways, running the same rune setup just based on the circumstances of your game. So, if you're getting tons of kills, you can completely snowball yourself ahead really easily by building ability power. But, if you're maybe not super far ahead, or you just have really strong frontliners, then you can completely change your build, go utility, max shields, and then just kite backwards, shield your teammates, and you still have the root utility in team fights. So I've really liked Lux lately, and I've also, to side note, been building her with Barrier. I've mostly taken Barrier just because she's super squishy, super immobile, She has like one of the lowest base armors in the game, so she's just really easy to kill in team fights. So I've just been taking Barry, and that's solved most of my issues in terms of getting all in a lot of times. So jumping into rune setups. So I pretty much always take Aerie because of this. I like Aerie because it just gives you consistent damage on your poke. It also goes well with your auto attacks if you're ever getting passive procs with your autos after hitting a spell. I also like it because the numbers on Aerie with a shield is very, very powerful, since if you don't know, the W does very little shielding in the first part, and then when it comes back is the majority of it. I'd call it a 33% and a 66% like split in this regard. So having Aerie also just bolsters up the 33% to give it a lot of power in your initial shielding. Overall, just love this rune for this champion. After that, we're going to be running Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm. For the same reasons for Soraka, almost all your items build at a CDR, so just having the extra AP is really, really good when you overcap, since they've nerfed Absolute Focus. And then Gathering the Storm, because I just feel like Scorch numbers are just not worth it anymore. After that, we're going to be running Inspiration, and we're going to be taking Biscuits and 5% CDR. So if you have 45% CDR, then your W at max level is 5.5 seconds, but it has a 6-second uptime. So you can just spam shields the entire time. Because this is what I like to call an breakpoint for a skill, I really like the 5% CDR just in general. And then we get Biscuits because if you're spamming your E, which is your harass ability in lane, and fishing for hooks and maybe shielding, you tend to run out of mana before you get mana flow all the way to full. So I just like the Biscuits to kind of solve some mana issues in the early stages. After that, we're going to be running double Adaptive Force in our offensive and flex. And then usually I just take armor in most cases, even if I'm against the mage, just because I'm always worried about the 80 carry all in AB. But if you feel like you're getting harassed a lot by the mage, then the magic resist is completely reasonable. So for itemization, so let's identify the 2 points of reference and the skill builds that go into this, because this is very intricate. So if I get really far ahead and I'm winning, I'm going to max my E first. And I'm going to build things like Ludens, Death Cap, and Void Staff. Those are usually going to be my 3 core items. And then my 4th is just varied. Sometimes I get an Athene's in there anyway, just because it's super good. This is if I'm snowballing. And I also usually opt into Sorcerer Shoes in this case too. So you could see something like Sorcerer Shoes, maybe an Oblivion Orb, Ludens, Death Cap, and a Void Staff is kind of like your full fleshed out build. And then a Morello's obviously at the end. As like a full AP build where I'm carrying and doing tons of damage. So I'll max E first, then I'll max W, then I'll max Q last. No matter what build I do, I always max Q last because it doesn't reduce the cooldown of it, just amps up the damage. So I don't really care about it, and the root duration stays the same. So it's not like very valuable stat-wise to invest points into it. Now, in a lot of games though, I've been doing a different build, which is usually do 2 points in E for laning phase. And then kind of the same concept as Soraka, I'm going to max shield out. So shield is maxed by level 9. Feels really, really good in team fights. The shielding power and the numbers are absolutely insane if you're hitting multiple teammates at once, plus the Aerie. And then the build path for this is just going to be Lucidity Boots, and we're going to go first item Athene's. Second item is usually an Ardent, but sometimes Redemption. And then if after that I don't feel like I need a Redemption, I will go Death Cap. If I do need a Redemption, then it'll be Redemption, then Death Cap. And then the final item is something like Redemption afterwards if I want to like have AP. Also, somewhere in between all of this, I do end up getting a Dark Seal on this champion, but sometimes I sell it depending on how many stacks I have, and sometimes I just sit on it. But I almost never upgrade it to Magi's, because usually when I upgrade to Magi's, everyone suicides and kills me, and it's not very fun, and I get angry. No anger. Alright. So, jumping into number 1 on the tier list, despite actually getting some nerfs, is Thresh. Since you can still build coin, the relic nerfs have no relevance whatsoever, and Thresh just in general just has an insane amount of kill pressure and kill potential in all lanes. On top of that, he just has really good gank setups, and because of the fact that you can play him both aggressive and defensive in terms of, you know, leading with hooks and setting up kills, or potentially throwing a lantern, helping your teammate kites back, put a box down for zoning, because of like his just adjustable playstyle based on the game and his ability to get kills 2v2 quite easily and very like obviously, you know, when you hit a hook, your teammate goes in. It's very obvious in terms of what your teammate needs to do to follow up. Thresh just comes in at number 1, on top of the fact that he can have an adjustable start in terms of coin or relic based on his matchups. So, jumping into rune setups is going to be Aftershock, once again. And then, kind of the same stuff that we've been talking about with Galio and Alistar. Font of Life, if you can't hit the turret and you want something that's just going to heal and shield you a little bit better, in like 2v2 all-ins, or just in team fights in general. Demolish if you feel like you can't actively walk up and hit the turret. After that, it's just Second Wind or Conditioning, depending on your matchup. If I'm getting poked a lot, then I'm going to be taking Second Wind. If I don't feel like I'm trading a lot, or I'm against an all-in lane, then Conditioning is what I'm going to opt into. Just never been a big fan of bone plating as of lately, since the 1.5 second uptime. And then, since I do build Redemption usually first on Thresh, I'm going to be going Revitalize once again. And then after that, if you go Relic, I recommend going Minion Dematerializer and Hextech Flash. Now, if you don't go Relic and you decide to go Coin, which is usually what I opt into, by the way, for solo queue, then we're just going to change the Minion Dematerializer to Biscuits. And then everything else kind of stays the same with Hextech Flash. For our stats, we're going to be running, once again, Attack Speed. This is even better on champions like Thresh, because you want to be auto-attacking the minions to push level 1, plus your Flay auto-attack and how many auto-attacks you're doing with your chain is very, very valuable, and you actually do a lot of AA damage on this champion in general, so I'm just going to say 100% you should go Attack Speed. Now, the flex I've actually kind of adjusted depending on my lane matchups. If I feel like I need to hit a hook and score a kill on the lane, and that's how I need to play the lane. So let's say it's like a Caitlyn Morgana, Caitlyn Zyra, things that are really long range and I can't lead with Flay as frequently, I'm going to opt into Adaptive Force actually, just to get extra damage on my all-in when I hit a hook. Now, if you can lead with Flays, or you're just not comfortable with running this stat at all, completely reasonable to just go Armor and MR based on your matchup once again. There's a lot of poke and harass from mage damage. You can run a split of 6 Armor, 8 MR, or double MR if you feel like the AD carry isn't going to do anything to you. This is mostly up to your personal decisions in terms of whatever matchup you're playing against. So, jumping into itemization is going to be Moby Boots, and we're going to upgrade whatever starting item, so Relic or Coin, to our Tier 3 level. They're just really efficient in this regard, despite the fact that, it costs a lot of gold. It's definitely worth investing, plus it just gives you a good amount of HP in the early stages and an extra ward, which is very valuable on a champion like Thresh who wants to play through vision control in the mid game. After that, we're going to be building Redemption first. Just in general, I've liked this item as a first item. It seems to work the best with Thresh, and you're never going to feel super great about the itemizations that you end up getting on Thresh, so this is mostly on personal preference in terms of itemization afterwards. Now, after I get the Redemption, I usually like to opt into another CDR item, so I've been going Knight's Vow despite the fact that I am ranged champion, so I get half effectiveness, because nothing else seems to really fit well with the champion. Maybe you could make arguments for Zeke's, but even that, usually when you pop your ultimate, you're kiting backwards. You're not in the fray of the fight, so you're not usually getting a lot of Zeke's value in that regard. So Zeke's and Knight's Vow are both okay-ish, but they're not great. So I prefer getting the Knight's Vow over the Zeke's if I'm going to choose one for CDR. Then after that, it's usually just something like a Locket, just to get generic MR and have a shield on your teammates. Then your last item, maybe a Gargoyle Stoneplate if you feel like you're always in the fray of things. Maybe you get something like a Zeke's afterwards. Mostly I never get to this item's breakpoint, but it's going to be mostly your personal preference in terms of your last item. You can go into greedier things, maybe like Caranduins or an Abyssal Mask, but I'm not too crazy about it right now. Overall, the most important thing is just having a good early game on this champion and getting your Redemption. Then after that, it's kind of just your freedom to pick whatever you want. You could go Locket second, and that would be completely fine too. Anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment in the section below, and hit that bell and whistle for notifications. I'm Lohpally, and I'll see you next time. Peace.